The first time in 6 years that Elena Parker allowed herself to breathe, she was already at 30,000 feet. Her phone buzzed in the seat pocket beside her. One last email subject flashing across the lock screen. Quick thing before you go. 5 minutes? She stared at it for a moment, thumb hovering, then smiled faintly and pressed ignore. For once, someone else could handle the quick thing. Lucentis Systems wasn't a bad company. It was just the kind that rewarded exhaustion and called it loyalty. Elena had been its backbone since her late 20s. Late nights, weekends, urgent Sunday morning calls that always ended with someone saying, "You're a lifesaver." That's how she became irreplaceable, by letting herself be replaced by her job. Until now. She had planned this trip like an operation. 3 weeks in Greece, no laptop, no work phone, no check-ins. She'd even written her out-of-office reply with the precision of a lawyer. Thank you for your message. I am on approved leave until July 18th and will not be checking emails. For urgent matters, please contact the operations team directly. She'd added the phrase, approved leave, deliberately, because Elena never wrote anything without thinking 5 steps ahead. When she landed in Santorini, the Mediterranean heat wrapped around her like a welcome she didn't know she needed. The wind smelled of salt and lemons, the sky so bright it felt unreal. For the first 2 days, she didn't touch her phone. She walked barefoot on sun-warmed tiles, drank cold white wine for breakfast, and read a book that had nothing to do with management strategy. By day 3, her inbox began to pile up. At first it was innocent, a ping from her assistant, a tiny clarification request. Then another, flagged urgent. By evening, her phone had 15 unread messages, all variations of the same thing. Can you just confirm one number? She didn't reply. Instead, she watched the sunset drip into the sea like liquid bronze, and let herself imagine a life where she didn't exist purely in reply chains. By day 4, the tone had shifted. Her boss, Graham, sent a curt message. We understand you're on leave, but the client is requesting your input on the Q3 rollout. Please advise, ASAP. Elena read it once, set the phone down, and took another sip of wine. She'd told them everything before leaving. She'd delegated tasks, recorded procedures, even set up auto-responses for emergencies. There was nothing left undone, except the company's inability to let go of control. The next morning, a new subject line appeared in her inbox. Urgent. Failure to respond may be considered neglect. Her fingers hovered above the screen. She could almost feel her old reflexes. The guilt, the trained panic of always saying yes. Then she remembered the clause. Clause 14.3. Protected leave. The line she'd fought for in her contract 5 years ago during the merger. No one had understood why she insisted on it. She had. She replied with 4 words. See clause 14.3, Graham. Then she switched her phone to airplane mode, lay back on the balcony chair, and listened to the waves beat rhythmically against the rocks below. Steady, unbothered, ancient. For the first time in her professional life, she felt something terrifying and thrilling all at once. Freedom. Somewhere back in London, an HR manager was probably forwarding her email to legal, her name rising through layers of bureaucracy like smoke. But Elena wasn't thinking about that. She was thinking about the horizon, the way the sun touched the sea without asking permission. The phone stayed silent, and she didn't miss the sound. By the 5th morning, the peace began to fracture. Elena was halfway through breakfast, strong Greek coffee, local honey, a view so perfect it felt like fiction. when her phone lit up with the kind of urgency that doesn't belong on vacation. First came an email marked time-sensitive. Then a Teams notification. Then another, this one from HR. She ignored them all. But after the fifth buzz, she sighed, turned the screen toward her, and read the first line of the latest message. Subject: performance concerns during critical operations. Elena, failure to respond to essential communications during your approved leave may result in disciplinary review. Please acknowledge receipt of this message immediately. Her laugh startled even herself, quiet, incredulous, amused. Performance review, she muttered, during vacation. She didn't answer. Instead, she slipped her phone face down beneath a linen napkin, leaned back in her chair, and watched the caldera shimmer in the morning light. The world here had no deadlines, no deliverables, just sun, sea, and silence. By noon, a new email arrived, this one from Graham, her department head. Elena, I'm disappointed you're ignoring us. The Q3 numbers can't wait until you get back. We all make sacrifices. That's leadership. Call me. Leadership. She'd heard that word weaponized too many times, as if leadership meant self-erasure. It was the company's favorite justification for boundary breaking. We're counting on you. But this time, she didn't flinch. She typed one sentence and hit send. I'm on approved leave. Please refer to operations. Then she closed her laptop, pulled her sun hat low, and went for a swim. The water was cold at first, then perfect. With every stroke, she felt the pressure of years loosening, the phantom weight of responsibility melting into the sea. She stayed out there until her fingers wrinkled, until she forgot what urgent felt like. That evening, she returned to her villa to find her voicemail blinking like an accusation. 3 messages, all from the same number, all from HR. She pressed play. Hi, Elena. This is Natalie from HR. We've received concerns from management regarding your lack of responsiveness during Operational Review Week. Pause. Please be advised that ongoing refusal to engage may be deemed non-compliance under Section 9 of your employment agreement. Pause again. We'll need to discuss this immediately. Please confirm receipt by end of business today. She looked at her watch. It was 9 p.m. in Greece, still early morning in London. She could call. She could fix it in 5 minutes. She always had before. But then she remembered why she was here. Her job had survived years of her saying yes. It could survive 2 weeks of no. The next day, another email appeared, shorter, colder. Your refusal to engage with HR during a defined escalation may result in termination. Termination. They'd used the word. For a moment, her stomach turned. Years of habit made her reach for the phone. Then she stopped herself, took a breath, and opened the PDF she'd saved long ago. Her contract. There it was, buried deep in black and white legal text she knew by heart. Section 14.3, Protected Leave. Employee shall not be subject to any form of disciplinary action or termination during approved leave. Any such action will trigger immediate severance as outlined in Section 21.2. She smiled. Elena Parker wasn't reckless. She was prepared. She'd written that clause herself, negotiated every word during the merger when they were desperate to keep her. Back then, HR had signed off just to move the paperwork along. They'd forgotten. She hadn't. By sunset, her phone vibrated one last time, a call from Daniel in legal. She let it ring, then texted back one line. Section 14.3 still applies. Then she turned off her phone entirely, walked barefoot to the edge of the cliffside terrace, and watched the last light fall over the Aegean. In London, someone was probably drafting an urgent HR memo about her. Here, the world kept turning, Quiet. Blue. Infinite. For the first time in her career, she wasn't the one answering. By the time her flight touched down at Heathrow, the illusion of peace was gone. Elena switched her phone off airplane mode and watched as her screen lit up with over 100 new notifications. Emails, missed calls, HR flags, meeting cancellations, and one text from her assistant, marked urgent. "Elena, I don't know what's going on, but HR just deactivated your access." She frowned, unbuckling her seatbelt. Deactivated? When she reached the terminal, she opened her company email on her personal phone. It wouldn't load. Then she tried her calendar. Error. Slack. Unauthorized. VPN. Denied. By the time she cleared customs, she knew. Lucentis Systems headquarters was all glass and performance, a monument to modern productivity, the kind of building where everyone smiled too tightly and spoke in buzzwords. When she arrived the next morning, her keycard blinked red against the security panel. "Badge issue?" the receptionist asked politely. "Apparently," she said, though she already knew better. The receptionist checked the system, hesitated, then looked up with that uneasy sympathy reserved for layoffs. "HR asked me to let them know if you came by." Of course they did. Moments later, Natalie from HR appeared in the lobby, a woman so polished she looked printed. She held a folder in both hands like a priest holding scripture. "Elena," she said in her rehearsed, careful tone, "do you have a moment to talk privately?" Elena gestured toward a nearby conference room. "Lead the way." Inside, Natalie exhaled as though preparing for something unpleasant but necessary. "I'll get straight to it. Due to your repeated refusal to engage during an active operations cycle, management has made the decision to terminate your employment effective immediately." Elena stayed quiet, just watching her. Natalie continued, a little faster now, her voice brittle around the edges. "This decision was not made lightly. There were multiple attempts to contact you, and your lack of responsiveness placed key deliverables at risk. You'll receive your final paycheck and benefits information in the post within 10 business days." Elena nodded once. "You're sure about this?" "Yes," Natalie said, mistaking calm for confusion. "I know this is difficult, but it's not difficult," Elena interrupted. "Just final." Natalie blinked, unsure whether she was being agreed with or corrected. "If you could sign this acknowledgement of termination, we can process everything today." Elena skimmed the page. It was standard, emotionless, procedural, already printed before she arrived. She signed neatly at the bottom, closed the folder, and handed it back. Then she looked Natalie in the eye. "Did legal approve this?" "Yes, of course," Natalie said, too quickly. "Good," Elena said, standing. "Then you won't mind if I double-check that with them." Natalie's smile faltered. "Is there an issue?" "Not yet," Elena said. "But there will be." As she walked out, the eyes of half the office followed her, curious, pitying, and a little afraid. Elena didn't bother explaining. She simply smiled, waved to the receptionist, and stepped into the elevator. When the doors closed, she allowed herself a small, quiet laugh. HR thought they'd taken something from her. They had no idea what they'd just activated. That night, she sat in her apartment surrounded by neatly stacked boxes of old project binders, contracts, and archived files. The artifacts of a career built on precision. She found the one she wanted. Employment agreement, revised 2018. She opened to page 27, where her pen had underlined a single section years ago. Section 14.3, protected leave. Any involuntary termination occurring during or immediately following a period of approved leave shall constitute breach of contract and activate full severance entitlement equal to 24 months total compensation, with immediate vesting of all unissued shares. She read it twice, slowly, savoring every word. It was airtight. She'd made sure of it. Elena drafted a short email to the company's legal department. Nothing emotional, just precise. Subject: breach of contract, immediate notice. Dear legal team, please be advised that my termination, effective July 19th, directly violates Section 14.3 of my employment agreement attached. As such, I am invoking the full severance entitlement and accelerated equity clause under Section 21.2. Kindly confirm acknowledgement of breach and begin the settlement process immediately. Regards, Elena Parker. She attached the document, pressed send, and closed her laptop. The city outside her window glowed with evening light, calm, oblivious. Her phone buzzed again. A missed call from HR. She didn't answer. Instead, she poured herself a glass of wine, leaned back in her chair, and whispered, "Your move." At 8:11 a.m., Elena's email left her outbox like a quiet arrow. By 8:14, it pierced the first calendar. Inside Lucentis systems, the day began with an unusual flurry. Outlook chimed like nervous laughter. An emergency invite populated across legal, finance, and HR. Urgent, 14.3 exposure. Huddle, 15 minutes. The subject alone told her everything. Someone had opened the contract. Someone had found the fuse. At 8:26, her phone rang. Not HR this time. Daniel Cho, Associate General Counsel. She let it ring twice before answering. Elena Parker. Ms. Parker, he said, clipped and careful. We received your notice. Could you walk me through your understanding of 14.3? My understanding, she said mildly, that you violated it. Silence breathed on the line. Papers shifted. The soft click of a mute button, a whisper to someone nearby, another click. We're reviewing. I'd like to propose a conversation later today with our chief people officer to— No, Elena said, gentle but immovable. This is not an HR matter. It is a breach. Your counterparty is legal. Put the general counsel on the call. And bring finance. Another mute. Another whisper. We'll coordinate. Do so by noon, she said, and hung up. She set the phone down and smiled without teeth. Prepared wasn't bravado. It was oxygen. By 9:03, the internal chat channels pulsed with euphemisms. Hashed legal ops. Confirm original signing authority on 2018 Executive Retention Addendum. Hash people team. Clarify who authorized termination. Was legal looped prior to notice? Hash finance leadership. Run scenario analysis on 24-month comp plus equity acceleration. Include tax gross-up. At 9:17, another email found her. From Finance Controller. Subject, clarification on equity tranche. The body was polite, surgical. Could you confirm whether the 2020 and 2021 performance shares were contingent on continued employment? She replied with a scanned page. Section 21.2, acceleration on breach. Highlighted text. All unvested awards shall vest immediately upon breach under 14.3. No adjectives, just law. At 9:41, her former boss tried another angle. From Graham, Elena, let's not make this adversarial. If you'll retract the breach notice, we can reconsider the termination as a misunderstanding. She read it twice, savoring the irony, then typed 6 words that tasted like quiet thunder. The notice stands. See you at noon. By 10, Lucentis was a choreography of restraint. Legal combed SharePoint for the original red lines, Finance revived an ancient spreadsheet called retention_scenario_worstcase.xlsm. In a glass-walled room on the 18th floor, 3 people leaned over a printed contract as if it were a live wire. "Who signed this?" the CFO asked, voice low. "Former CEO," legal replied. "Post-merger talent lock. We retained the language. And HR fired her during approved leave?" A beat. "Yes." "Why?" "Because they didn't read it." The CFO closed his eyes. When he opened them, budget lines had become real money. At 11:58, Elena joined the video conference. The screen filled with faces arranged by urgency. General Counsel, CFO, Head of HR, acting, Daniel Cho. A paralegal with the haunted look of someone who had slept at the office. "Ms. Parker," the General Counsel began, voice polished to neutrality. "Thank you for meeting. We take your notice seriously." "You should," she said. "We're eager to resolve this amicably," HR's acting head added, smiling like guided sunlight. "No one wants a protracted, Elena repeated. "I asked for acknowledgement of breach and initiation of settlement. We can be done in 20 minutes. The General Counsel steepled his fingers. "We need to discuss scope. Section 14.3 references severance equal to 24 months' compensation. We interpret compensation as base salary." Elena tilted her head, the way one humors a child rearranging chess pieces mid-game. "Then your interpretation conflicts with your own definitions." She shared her screen. Definitions. Section 1.7 blossomed in crisp black. Total compensation means base salary, target bonus, and any cash value premiums applicable to the role. The CFO glanced down and scribbled something fatal to a budget. "And equity?" Legal asked carefully. "Acceleration. Partial." She scrolled. 21.2 acceleration glowed like a verdict. Full. The paralegal inhaled almost audibly. HR tried mercy. "Elena, we truly regret the experience you had while on leave. If we rescind the termination and reinstate—" "No," Elena said softly. "Trust once broken is not a position you can reinstate. We settle." The CFO found his voice. "If we proceed, would you consider a discount for confidentiality?" "You fired me for refusing to work on vacation," Elena said, tone even. "The confidentiality you want is already yours. I didn't call the press. I called your lawyer." A pause. The General Counsel nodded once, a small acknowledgement of equal footing. "Very well. We propose the following: 24 months base and target bonus, immediate vesting as specified, benefits continuation, and a mutual non-disparagement clause." "Add a stock sale assistance window," she said. 1 year, scheduled in quarterly tranches to avoid market shock, and a letter acknowledging eligibility for rehire at strong performer status. You'll need it for the reference checks you cannot refuse. Another pause. The CFO mouthed a number to legal. Legal did the math that turns into policy. "Agreed," the General Counsel said at last. "We'll draft today." "Good," Elena replied. "Wire by Friday." CFO winced. "Friday is ambitious." "Ambitious," she said, "is what you called emailing me on the beach." He almost smiled. Almost. After the call, she walked to the window and let London's gray light meet the calm inside her. She thought of the villa, the sea, the message she'd typed with 4 words that had carried years of foresight. Sea Clause 14.3. Her phone buzzed. A final email from Daniel Cho. "For what it's worth, the clause is elegant. I hope you wrote it." She replied with a single line. "I did." Another message arrived, this one from an unknown address. No body, just a PDF attachment. PTO policy, draft revision. She opened it and found a sentence newly born from pain. No employee shall be contacted for work during approved leave except to address life safety emergencies. Underline. Bold. The company would market it as culture. She knew it was consequence. She closed her laptop and exhaled, a sound like a door closing gently. They had wanted her to be available forever. Instead, she'd made herself unforgettable for 2 very expensive years. Preparation, she thought, pouring tea, is just kindness you pay forward to your future self.
Outside, a gull dragged a bright ribbon of sky across the Thames. Inside, her calendar chimed, a single reminder she'd set on the plane weeks ago. July 19. Breathe. She did. And for the first time in her career, the room felt big enough for the rest of her life. By Friday morning, the money had cleared. Elena opened her banking app with a kind of reverence. 2 years' salary, her full performance bonus, and a number of Lucentis stock options that now belonged entirely to her. It was quiet wealth, not gaudy, not wild, just the sum of 6 years of unpaid weekends and unclaimed peace, delivered in a single wire transfer. But the money wasn't the real story. The real story was what happened inside Lucentis. At 9 a.m., a flurry of emails shook the upper floors. Subject: Post-termination review, confidential. Inside, a line that froze half the leadership team mid-sentence. It has come to our attention that the termination of Ms. Elena Parker resulted in a breach of contract triggering material loss. This correspondence is intended for internal awareness only. The thread stretched across departments like a crack in glass. HR blamed legal. Legal blamed HR. Finance blamed both. And no one could answer the simplest question. How did no one read Section 14.3? At 10:15, in the executive boardroom, panic took a more physical form. The CFO stood by the window, arms crossed, jaw set. The interim head of HR scrolled through the termination emails as though looking for a different ending. And Daniel Cho from legal, who had handled the settlement, looked 10 years older. The CEO, Graham, was pacing. 2 years' pay, he muttered, plus equity. That's insane. Daniel's tone was measured, the kind of tone used by people who have already given up on winning. It's not insane. It's enforceable. You signed the addendum yourself in 2018. Graham stopped pacing. No one told me it applied to her level. It applies to anyone who negotiated it, Daniel said, sliding the file across the table. And she did. The HR director's voice was thin. She wrote it, didn't she? Daniel nodded. Yes. She drafted the first version during the merger. We reused her template for senior management contracts. The CFO laughed, short and bitter. So she essentially weaponized her own policy. Daniel corrected him quietly. She protected herself with it. We're the ones who turned it into a weapon. Silence settled. Outside, London went about its usual rhythm. Horns, sirens, ambition. Inside, Lucentis had learned what arrogance cost per fiscal quarter. By noon, word spread. People didn't know the numbers, but they knew the outline. Elena Parker got fired, invoked a clause, and walked away rich. The whispers turned to awe, then to pride, then unexpectedly, to courage. By the end of the week, employees started adding one line to their email signatures. Currently on approved leave, not available for contact until return. HR tried to discourage it, but it was too late. The statement became a badge of quiet rebellion, a shared reminder that boundaries weren't disobedience. In the legal department, a new team was assigned to policy review. Their first task? To make sure no one else had a clause like hers. They found 6. By the following Monday, Lucentis held an all-hands meeting. The CEO, now visibly deflated, stood before 100 employees and gave a speech about learning from oversights and the importance of respecting personal boundaries. No one missed the irony. A slide appeared behind him. Lucentis, the new era of balance. Even the interns had to look down to hide their smiles. Meanwhile, Elena sat in her kitchen, watching the rain streak across her window, tea steaming gently in her hands. Her phone buzzed. Daniel Cho. The board wants to know if you'd be open to consulting on employee relations reform.
You'd be compensated well. She smiled. The audacity was almost impressive. Her reply was short. I'm still on vacation. She set the phone down and opened her laptop, not to work, but to book another flight. This time to Lisbon. She wasn't running from anything. She was simply honoring the freedom she'd earned. Back at Lucentis, the shockwave continued to ripple. HR issued a memo about restoring trust. Finance restructured severance budgets. And in legal, Daniel filed her case under a new internal tag, Policy Catalyst 2025. He lingered over the document longer than necessary before adding a note to the record. Case closed. Settlement executed. Lesson expensive but invaluable. Then he sent one last message to her, just 4 words. Clause 14.3. Legendary. When the email arrived, Elena laughed, a low, genuine laugh that filled the room. She closed her laptop, stood, and looked out over the city. Lucentis was still spinning, trying to repair what her silence had broken. But she was whole for the first time in years. The company had bought her time, and she was going to spend it exactly as she pleased. Lucentis tried to bury the story the way companies always do, under paperwork and silence. By Monday, the NDA drafts were on version 7. The subject lines grew more delicate with each revision. Mutual respect language, tone calibrations, legacy framing. The lawyers treated adjectives like explosives. Elena read every line with the same calm she'd brought to crisis meetings for years. This wasn't a fight. It was final housekeeping. In a glass-walled conference room 23 floors up, the last session began. General Counsel opened with choreography, a half-smile, a nod, a folder placed at a precise angle. CFO sat beside him, spine straight, numbers living behind his eyes. HR, acting, tried for warm. It came out tepid. "We appreciate your time," General Counsel said.
Our aim is closure with dignity. Mine too, Elena replied, sliding her pen parallel to the margin. Let's close. They moved briskly. Severance. 24 months total compensation. Equity. Immediate acceleration with a prearranged sell window in quarterly tranches. Benefits. Cobra Bridge, company paid. Non-disparagement. Mutual. Reference. Eligible for rehire. Performance noted as exceeds expectations. The CFO cleared his throat. We'd like to include a no admission of liability clause. Fine, Elena said, not looking up. Add a no assignment of blame clause. A small beat of surprise. General Counsel nodded. Accepted. They arrived at the paragraph that had eaten 3 days. Silence scope. Your counsel requested an explicit carve-out for speaking about PTO culture in general, GC said. No company names, no numbers. Elena tapped the page. Include, employee retains right to discuss best practices, labor standards, and healthy boundary setting in anonymized terms. Done. HR ventured a smile. We also drafted language for a post-incident policy revision. No contact during leave, except for life safety emergencies. We'd like your input on rollout. Elena raised an eyebrow. You mean the clause you should have written 5 years ago? HR's smile turned honest. Yes. She softened. Make managers sign it, not just staff. Noted. At the end, GC slid the signature packet forward, heavy as a book. Wire confirmation already sent, he said. This finalizes it. Elena signed. The pen scratched a clean path through the last vestige of her old life. She handed the folder back and waited for the emotion that never came. Thank you, GC said quietly, for keeping this professional. I didn't keep anything, she said. I enforced what we agreed to. The CFO exhaled, something between defeat and respect. For what it's worth, we've changed more in a week than we did in a year. Good, Elena said, standing. Make sure it outlives the news cycle. The news cycle had already moved. There was no headline with her name, only a trend line. HR blogs ran pieces on boundaries as policy. A VC wrote a think piece about retention via rest. A union organizer clipped one sentence from an anonymous internal memo. We contacted an employee on leave. We won't again. And pinned it to a thread titled, How Culture Actually Changes. Her inbox followed suit. A law school asked her to guest lecture. A healthcare startup wanted her to design a leave framework. An old colleague wrote, I used your OOO template. Nobody died. And from Daniel Cho, policy goes live Friday. Thank you for forcing the issue we should have led. Elena didn't tweet. She didn't post a victory thread. She booked a morning train to the coast and left her phone dark until the sea replaced the city in her peripheral vision. On the platform, a journalist intercepted her, polite but hungry. Ms. Parker, quick comment? Off the record? There's nothing off the record anymore, she said without malice. Then on the record. She considered, then offered the only sentence she wanted on anyone's tape. Write your contracts like you'll need them on your best day, not your worst. Then keep your promises. He blinked, realized there was no scandal in that, and let her pass. In Lisbon a week later, mediation memories faded into something simple. Morning light on tile. Quiet cafes where nobody cared about clause numbers. Afternoons when time belonged to her again. She met friends for late dinners, slept without alarms, opened her laptop only to rename a folder. Career after. Messages still arrived. Grateful strangers, careful recruiters, cautious CEOs. She answered few, but one caught her. A small NGO building a toolkit for worker well-being. No money in it, just meaning. She replied, happy to help. On a warm evening, she sat on a rooftop with a friend from her earliest Lucentis days. Someone who remembered the version of her that believed endurance was identity. You don't look tired anymore, he said. I'm not performing resilience, she said. It's quieter when it's real. He raised his glass, to quitting what should have been refused, and refusing what had to be learned. She laughed. To clause 14.3. To the woman who wrote it. Back in London, Lucentis published the new leave policy with uncharacteristic humility. No hero language, no stock photos of sun hats and laptops on beaches. Just a paragraph that said, we don't contact you on leave. We trust our systems, our teams, and your right to rest. A junior engineer printed it and taped it to the inside of her locker. A manager forwarded it with the subject line, "Good." HR added a training module titled Boundaries as an Asset. Finance updated a model and wrote, almost tenderly, "Cost of burnout, cost of backup." In legal, Daniel closed the last internal ticket and dragged the case file into an archive folder. Before letting it go, he added one final line to the notes. The settlement was expensive. The lesson is priceless if we keep it. He hovered, then hit save. Elena woke to gulls and sunlight, brewed coffee, and opened a blank document. The cursor blinked with the patience of a friend. She began sketching a slim guide, plain language, no jargon. Rest protected. A practical playbook for PTO that works. Not a memoir, not a manifesto. A manual. The thing she wished she'd had at 27. A notification glowed. Wire receipt. Second tranche of equity sold, per schedule. She glanced, smiled, and closed it without a second thought. Money had bought her time. Policy had bought everyone else a chance. She typed a new heading. Chapter 1. Say no before you need to. Outside, the city lifted into day. Inside, she kept writing, line by simple line, the kind of work you do when you finally remember that your life is not a deliverable. It's the reason the rest exists at all. The Lucentis office was quieter now. Not the calm kind of quiet, the cautious kind, the sort that fills a space after something has cracked and no one wants to step on the shards. 3 weeks had passed since the settlement. The leadership team called it a resolution. The staff called it what it was, Elena's earthquake. HR hosted mandatory training sessions titled Respecting Employee Boundaries. Legal sent out revised contracts with bolded PTO clauses. Managers pretended to be inspired, but everyone knew the truth. They were terrified. You couldn't buy fear that pure. Inside the building's glass lobby, the company's new slogan gleamed across the wall. Lucentis, work with integrity. Most employees walked past it with quiet amusement. The words felt borrowed, earned by someone else. The HR director, who had pushed Elena's termination, had resigned 2 days after the settlement. The internal memo said she wanted to pursue new opportunities in consulting. No one believed it. Rumor had it she'd tried to spin the situation as a misunderstanding, but Daniel from legal had shut that down with a single sentence. The misunderstanding was reading an email and not a contract. What no one knew, at least not yet, was that the ripples had reached far beyond Lucentis. 3 other companies within the same investment group quietly contacted Daniel, asking for insight into risk exposure on executive contracts. Translation: how many more Elenas are we sitting on? The answer, as Daniel soon discovered, was several. He spent late nights reviewing contracts drafted during the same merger. Every few pages he found traces of her language. 14.3, 21.2, variations on the same protection. She hadn't just written her own safety net, she'd built a template that outlived her. By Friday, Daniel sent a confidential memo to the board. Subject: Legacy Clauses, Parker, Template. Summary: the protected leave clause exists in 6 senior contracts. It is enforceable. Recommend honoring it voluntarily before it's triggered. The CFO's reply came 2 minutes later. Find her. That weekend, Daniel called her. Elena, it's Daniel. She smiled into the receiver. Let me guess. You found more. 6, he said. Maybe 7, depending on who kept their old addendums. You realize you built an insurance policy for half the leadership team? Good, she said. Then I did something useful. Useful? He echoed, half laughing. You rewrote the company's liability structure. You're welcome. she said. He hesitated before continuing. The board's talking about reaching out. They want to bring you in as a consultant. Officially this time. Optics mostly. Make it look collaborative. And how does it actually look, Daniel? He paused. Like they're scared of you. She laughed quietly. That's not fear. That's memory. On Monday, an email hit her inbox. From Board Relations, subject, Strategic Advisory Offer. Miss Parker, we'd like to formally invite you to join Lucentis as an external advisor to assist in organizational ethics and policy reform. The retainer was 6 figures. She declined. Appreciate the offer, she replied. But I already advised you, in 2018. You just didn't listen. Within months, the story escaped the company walls. Not through scandal, through admiration. A popular business blog ran an anonymous feature, the clause that changed corporate vacation. It spread like wildfire, shared by exhausted professionals everywhere, each one quoting the same line. The smartest contract is the one that protects your peace. Soon after, legal forums began calling it the Parker Clause. Labor consultants referenced it in workshops. Even HR professionals, the good ones, quietly celebrated it as a turning point. The irony wasn't lost on her. The policy that once got her fired had now become industry best practice. One evening, Daniel called again, his tone softer this time. They're implementing the clause globally, he said. Europe, Asia, even the U.S. branches. No contact PTO, full enforcement. Imagine that, she said. All it took was losing 2 years' budget and one stubborn woman. You've done more for work-life balance than a decade of corporate wellness programs, he said. She smiled. That's because I didn't try to balance anything. I just stopped letting them take what wasn't theirs. At Lucentis, the cultural shift was undeniable. People actually took vacations. Real ones. Laptops stayed closed. Phones went unanswered. And when someone tried to test the boundaries, the phrase 14.3 was enough to end the conversation. HR started calling it a healthy precedent. Employees called it the gospel. And in quiet corners of the office, where whispers used to sound like fear, they now sounded like freedom. Elena didn't see any of that firsthand. She was back in Lisbon, sipping espresso under a striped awning, notebook open. On the first page, she'd written, "Peace is not time off. It's time owned." She glanced at the sea, blue, endless, mercifully still. Behind her, in cities she no longer belonged to, corporations were rewriting themselves in her image. She didn't need to go back to see it. The work was already done. 6 months later, Elena Parker's name had become a quiet legend in corporate circles, the kind that HR departments whispered about and executives quoted without attribution. No scandal, no exposé, just one woman, one clause, and one very expensive lesson that changed how companies treated silence. She never posted about it, never gave interviews, never wrote a tell-all. But her story grew anyway, whispered in break rooms, mentioned in late-night Slack chats, cited in law schools and leadership workshops. The Parker Clause had gone global. A financial magazine featured a small headline buried between stories about mergers and markets. Work-life revolution. Protected leave policies sweep Fortune 500. The article never named her, but she recognized her own words in the quotes. Employees are not machines, the CEO of a rival firm said. If they're on leave, they're not available, period. Elena smiled when she read that. He was the same man who once called her soft for asking about burnout metrics. Across Europe, new legislation had even borrowed her phrasing. The EU dubbed it the Protected Rest Directive, a fancy way of saying exactly what she'd written 5 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on her. Back home in Lisbon, Elena's days followed a slower rhythm. Morning coffee at a seaside cafe, long walks without notifications. Her calendar, once a battlefield of meetings and color-coded panic, was now blank, except for one recurring event. Write. Her project, Rest Protected, a practical playbook for boundaries that hold, had taken shape. A blend of case studies, strategy, and something more personal. The idea that respect isn't earned through exhaustion, but designed through foresight. She wasn't trying to inspire anyone. She was trying to document the blueprint she wished she'd had. When the book launched quietly through an independent publisher, she expected little fanfare. But the world was ready. Within weeks, business schools added it to ethics syllabi. HR consultants quoted it in webinars. LinkedIn filled with posts titled, "I read Rest Protected and took my first real vacation." Elena didn't care about sales or attention. What moved her were the messages, hundreds of them. "Your story made me renegotiate my contract. I used your clause template. It worked. I finally told my boss I won't answer calls on holiday. They said okay." Every one of those words was worth more than her settlement ever had. One afternoon, while editing the audiobook version, her producer handed her a note from a listener. "My mother never took a day off in 20 years. She died thinking rest was weakness. Thank you for teaching me it's not." Elena read it twice, then had to pause the recording. The emotion caught her unexpectedly. Not sadness, exactly, but weight. The kind that comes when you realize your pain didn't just end with you. It ended cycles that had been passed down for generations. Meanwhile, at Lucentis, the changes held. Daniel Cho, now promoted to general counsel, had turned her clause into an official framework. Employees affectionately called it the Elena Standard. HR, under new leadership, started every onboarding session with the same line. Respect isn't policy, it's practice. They even framed the sentence outside the break room. Once, Daniel sent her a photo of it. The caption simply read, "You changed the culture." Quietly. Her reply came hours later, from a beach at sunset. Quiet was the point. A year later, Rest Protected won an award for Most Influential Business Book of the Year. At the ceremony in London, she stood on stage, the same city where her career had ended, or begun again, depending on how you saw it. She kept her speech short. "I didn't set out to start a movement," she said. "I just wanted a vacation." Laughter. But that's how most change begins. Not with ambition, but with exhaustion. You break. And in the breaking, you decide you'll never go back to being something brittle. Boundaries aren't rebellion, they're design. And rest isn't a luxury. It's proof you trust your team to carry the weight without you. The applause was long, but what moved her most were the faces. Tired professionals, eager students, executives pretending not to take notes. Later that night, she walked alone through the city. The same skyline, the same glass towers. But the world behind those windows was different now. Not perfect, never that, but a little more human. She stopped at a crosswalk as her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "We just updated the company handbook again. Guess what section 14.3 is called now?" She opened the attachment. Elena's clause. For a moment, she just stood there, smiling under the streetlight, the city moving quietly around her. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she looked up at the towers she once helped build, at the glow of a company still learning to do better, and thought about all the people who would never have to fight that same fight again. When she finally replied, she wrote only 3 words. worth every minute. Then she turned off her phone, slipped it into her bag, and kept walking. Not away from anything, but toward a life that was finally, fully hers.